Good afternoon and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Amadin.
It's good to have you.
Yeah, my pleasure being here.
All right. Nigeria's electoral history or the process is a long one, but let's narrow it down to just before the general elections leading up to this very moment, where the tribunal, the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal judgment has affirmed the election on February 25th, 2023. I'd like to get your thoughts. What stage do you think we're at right now when it comes to our growth or our development on our electoral process?
Thank you very much, Amadin. I would want to say that democracies all over the world presently are at a crossroad. Okay? But then again, even in that, I would also say that there are no perfect systems. There's no foolproof system in itself. But then it takes people who are concerned for themselves to make the best of whatever situation that they have, to work to the best of their abilities. And I asking, for instance, the way forward in terms of reforms, in terms of what could be done. What could be done was even done prior to the elections, in terms of reforming the electoral processes, in terms of all the efforts that have been put into the electoral process. But the question for me, actually fundamental in a sense, is to ask the Western style democracy that we uphold or pret or try to ebb towards, has it really worked for Africa? The elaborate, very elaborate systems of elections and money spendings and all of those resources. Take for instance, I don't know if you know the figures that were spent on the IREB, the technology that was deployed to this election, this past election, and to the best of my knowledge and to the best of knowledge of every other person, it was a complete waste. Now, if all of those resources were invested into some other things, okay, I think that we should be rethinking the whole processes, the legitimacy of the whole processes, first of all. And by legitimacy, of course, you know that the absolute legitimacy relies and resides with the people. And so whatever the people does not sanction in the context of what does not work for the people, the generality of the people, it is illegitimate, and that's just how it is. Now, it is possible, let me even clarify something. It is possible for an, in quote, illegitimate process to produce a candidate, which has always been the case. That is one aspect of it. But the other side and part of the illegitimacy is what the product, the people who emerges does or do with the mandate of the people. Because it is possible for you to give good governance even if you emerged through wrong processes. Yeah. But again, also, I'm discountenancing the argument that it is impossible for anybody who subverts the will of the people to now use it, the power, for the benefit of the people. I'm assuming that somebody comes up through an illegitimate process, and this has happened in many places. There has been military governments in many parts of the world who thought that it was good to do good for their people, and over time they emerged to be loved by the people. Okay, so my argument therefore is the Western styled democratic governance or democracies and elaborate electoral processes that we have adopted so far, has it really worked for us? Has it? And the question is, or rather the answer is no. And by if you also look further into what is happening across Africa presently, you will see that the people generally are at their wits' end. So to think of reforms, to think of what I mean by reform, are we going to pour more monies into the electoral process? To do what? To achieve what? It takes people. What is, even before the electoral process was amended, supposedly, what is enough to give a people who want to do something for themselves a headway. So it takes people. It is not the criminal mindset that people have for ongoing with the mindset of coming forward to subvert whatever thing that is there. So if people, the political class, think that this whole sham will continue forever, it's not going to be possible. Something at some point is going to give way. Something is going to give, and it's just as simple as that. So it will be a disservice to myself, and I know to a whole lot of people, to come on air discussing how the electoral processes can be done what to. Done what to? What happened to the IREVs that were celebrated? Everybody, we're going to. What happened to them? We didn't even use them, right?
But do you think the lawmakers, in one way or another, dropped the ball when they made it open to INEC to decide? If you recall, there was an argument leading up to that time. Initially, the lawmakers said, no, electronic transmission is not possible, and we're not going to put it in the act. And we saw agitations from CSOs, from other bodies. INEC themselves argued that we can do it, put it in the act. And at the end of the day, the compromise was that instead of making it enforceable or make it a law that INEC must transmit electronically, they made it that INEC can choose to transmit electronically.
That is now the interpretation. I am not going to...
But do you think they dropped the ball? Do you think it was intentional?
I'm not going to, like I said, it would be a disservice to myself to begin to discuss the unnecessary intricacies of how to dodge from doing the right thing and argue in sophistry for how best people have not done the right thing. Do you understand me? I'm not going to toe that part with some irrelevant thoughts. Without the IREV, it is possible to deliver credible elections if the people want, if the electoral class want, if INEC wants. Now with technology, you're saying is even more impossible. I don't know how that is an argument, and I'm to begin to dissect that. It doesn't follow my train of thought. All I'm saying is that people are deliberate in this whole system to subvert. It's a deliberate thing. People don't want the system to work because, now let me clarify further. It takes people, you and I, to decide that we can make something work, even in its imperfection. But when people are pre-programmed in their minds to subvert the system, there's nothing that you can do about it because there's no foolproof system. So you want more laws created, more laws enacted, more policies. And what happened? Nigeria is already full of laws and policies and all kinds of things. What has been happening to the ones that's in existence? That's my argument. Or my position. I am not saying that nothing further could be done. It's a possibility to do things. But what have you done with the existing laws, with the existing policies? How have the people in whose hands, the people who are responsible, how has INEC responded? Who are the guilty parties in this? INEC comes with sophistry to tell us how it is not so much in the law that they should transmit electronically. I don't know how that's an argument. I don't know how I'm supposed to be here defending or even speaking in line with such. I'm on air. I don't want to use some words that wouldn't be very, responsible or reflective of me. Please.
But what do you think we're missing? You've pointed out that it seems things are intentionally being done a certain way to put us in certain situations. So what is the thing that we're missing? You You made mention of other democracies, even though they are not perfect, but from their own perspective, or perhaps ours, it seems theirs is working. So what is that missing piece, do you think?
I don't know if your time is enough for us to do this, but let me just say this. Primarily, I think that it's a mindset thing, first of all. I think I mentioned earlier that people are expecting a whole lot from the Nigerian young people. And in any case, let me just put it out there also that it is my belief and confidence that the Nigerian young people are among the global best, and that they are the best positive ambassadors that this nation has ever had, will always have. And that is not to valorize or glamorize them. I mean, there's a whole lot of things going on with the young people, with the Nigerian young people precisely. But my argument towards that is very simple. They cannot leave or be trained, or you cannot refuse to train people and expect excellence from them or results from them. You cannot give them wrong examples and then expect positive outcomes from the wrong examples that you give to them. It's like, beating up a child and then at the same time saying, don't cry, or why are you crying? Okay, so that's there. However, I did mention that the genesis of it is the people, and that's why I had to give the example of the young people who, for example, going forward in the next 50, 100 years, most likely are going to be belaboured with all of these sham going on here, and they are seeing and learning. So let me go back to what I wanted to say in this trajectory. I remember in an event very recently where President Jonathan was making mention of the 2014 confab that ex-President Jonathan, 2014 confab that he inaugurated for the way forward of Nigeria. And after that, even prior to this past election, people were mouthing the word restructuring. And I've always wondered, restructure to what? And the best answer that I've always gotten anywhere is, to the regional systems, right? And I sit back. Is it that we are devoid of thought? Is it that we cannot think? Like, the reason why the outcomes following the incidents that happened in our history is as a result of the supposed failures of the regional systems. Now, let me tell you something, and people are not paying attention to this. Most of the things happening in Nigeria today is as a lack of the fact that there isn't a cohesion in terms of a national consciousness. Nationality is devoid in our nation, and what the regional systems did for Nigeria was that it further enshrined that divisiveness. And that was the major reason why it was decapitated. Yes. And the argument for the unitary system was that it was going to enable us to be a nation, to bring more national cohesion, which hasn't worked. But if you look at it, you would find that the major problem that we have is that people think with the mindset of their region or their place or where they are coming from, or I leave the studio now, somebody calls and say, where is he from? Yeah, where is he from? And my thoughts are going to be dissected from the mindset of where he's coming from, right? And that is the major problem. That is a fundamental problem, because you cannot tell me that the people who have the interest of their heart, of the place where they come from at heart, would not do anything possible to make this place work. Okay. Now, having said that, you find that you can only begin from that perspective to now narrow down to the realities that we are faced with. And one of those realities is governance. Now you go right down to the root, not the Western style thing that we are bugged with. It is not working, and it cannot work. It cannot work. It hasn't worked. It hasn't delivered good governance and to the people of Africa, to the people of Nigeria. It's not working, and people are asking the fundamental question. They are struggling with round pegs in square holes. It's not working, and it's not going to work.
All right, you made mention going back to our roots. What would that look like? Trying to get those solutions and tailoring our own democracy to what works for us, and not, as you put it, trying to reach this ideal that perhaps work in other climes better than here.
I did mention that there is no foolproof system. And the reason why it seems like those people's, in quote, democracies are working for them is because part of the things that they are operating with it is natural with them. For example, I know that there are many things about who I am that is natural with me. For example, I am black. I cannot think of how I am black. You understand? I am black. And so many things, the parliamentary system that we tried before, it didn't work. The presidential system, now still the same thing. We struggle with these things because there's an element of ingrainedness that is not there. Elements of naturalness that is not there. Many can try, but it will always come. Have you even wondered, and people are always wondering why democracy is very expensive and stuff like that. It is very expensive. People cry that the National Assembly is taking on so much money, and my name is Rex Ima Odoemenam. Okay, and so I had to make that correction. So people are crying that the legislature is costing us a lot. Why will it not? Why will it not? But may I ask you, is it rational, knowing that Africa is a poor place, or Nigeria we do not have, so we have to borrow? How can you borrow to govern? Have you ever in your house where you come from, leadership, do you argue for who is the head of the home? It is only natural. There are certain things that shouldn't cost you. Leadership shouldn't be such an expensive thing for us, taking so much toll out of us.
Well, so you're talking about the expense now. I recall a certain lawmaker, actually not a lawmaker, he attempted he ran for election and he lost. But on Twitter, it caused a bit of an uproar where he said that he blames the electorate for this costliness. He spoke about his own experience. And I'll liken it with another person's experience. He spoke about how when he goes to places to campaign, that when he's set to leave, people come to meet him. What do you have for us? And then he has to drop a lot. And so he said that why are we complaining that lawmakers are, feeding fat, off funds, such as when the Senate president said that prayers would be sent to the senators and it caused an uproar. So he said, why are we complaining? Do you know how much these people spent to get there? So why do you expect them not to, recuperate it? I also liken it to another House of Reps and prospect who was actually disheartened by the process. He's a first-time politician, so to speak. And he said that whenever he went to places and he poured out his heart, he talked about how he was going to fix things, people just asked, what did you bring for us? And then they wrote him off. He didn't even get a single vote in his primary election. So the question now is, this blame that is being put on the electorate, is it really the electorate's fault?
Well, I think I said that when I talked about it's like beating up a child and then turning around say, don't cry. Okay. The people are poor. When people are poor, any crumb makes the only time that the Nigerian politicians, get to have or the people rather get to have audience in quote with the Nigerian politician is only during elections. And they hear all these monies thrown around and how they aggrandize themselves and things like that. Which in any case, I mean, you on the one hand, you wouldn't even blame the politicians because that is the structural way in which it is not even whether the politician wants to make this money or not. Structurally, it's been created that these monies would have to come to them. So in the construct of legitimacy, it is not illegitimate for them to have or to make the kind of money they are making because they are, in quotes, they are entitlements, right? So it's a structural thing. However, coming to the people, you can't tell someone who is hungry, okay, I'm going to get come fix your roads, and he has had the rhetorics all the while. This is not the first time. It's not the second time. It's not the third time. By the way, we are 20 plus years into democracy, in quotes, from 1999, right? And these people have seen countless elections. So it's only rational for them to think that, oh, this is the only time that we can bring these people to the table. And that is not to justify that, but that is the reality of it. But again, I keep going to the fundamental that I think is a waste of, the earlier we start, the better for us. This whole sham is not going to work. The best that it has done, it has not only foisted third-rate mediocrity upon us, but we are on a steady decline. So the earlier we begin to rethink our democracies or governance, our governance structures and systems and what works for us. I've always posited this argument prior to the elections. I told them that this whole process wasn't going to work, not because I had misgivings against it, but structurally, fundamentally, I knew that things were not going to work out if things are done the way that they are. There's no way. You cannot expect good results from wrong foundations. I don't know how people in the next possibly 50 years, God forbid, if things are not done correctly, fundamentally, I mean, we'll still be recycling this whole sham. It's just as simple as it is.
All right, you've spoken about the youths before. Now you're speaking about starting afresh, so to speak, in a manner of speaking. How do you think youths can start to make their voices heard or start to take these spots that at the end of the day, perhaps you already made a statement that our youths are sort of our best exports, so to speak. So it seems as though we should, the youths should be in more key positions, but we're not seeing that at the moment. How do you envision a time where it changes, where youths are able to take this place and stand toe to toe with people who are not offering the best? And how do you think it can happen?
I don't expect that there'll be any much difference with any youth standing toe to toe, in quote, as he put it. So, I mean, anybody who goes into the system, the system is already there. When you become a part of it, the electoral process, it swallows you up. You only play, there's only how much you can do. Okay, it's just a very straightforward thing. And that's why I keep going to the fundamentals. However, it is possible to begin to lend voice or voices to our rethinking process. And by rethinking, I mean we have to rethink our democratic processes, our governance systems and structures. I keep going back to this because it's fundamental. Any person who emerges, I mean, this is not the first time that young people, it is not true if we say that young people have not been given, or that young people have not been taking part in governance. It may not be, they may not have been 80, 90, or even 50%, but there has been pockets of them here and there. And many of them who, in quote, are older now, were young, and they were quite young when they started taking part in the political processes or governance or leadership roles and positions. And to the best of my knowledge, it hasn't turned out any way other than the way that it is. So what do I suggest? I suggest that the best thing is for us all to begin to lend our minds and our thoughts and our voices to the rethinking of the processes. And that's the only way, to the best of my knowledge. Every and any other thing can only be a delay of the evil day, or a continuation in the wrong direction. And I think that no matter how far away that you've gone in the wrong direction, it's only wise that you start turning back. The earlier the better. The earlier the better.
Fair enough. So I just want to quickly get your more thoughts from you on the issue of, you touched on it, Africa, should I say West Africa particularly, with the spate of coups we've been seeing, the last being Gabon, we saw Niger, and so on and so forth. What do you think is happening, and what do you think it means for Nigeria? Just the other day, we saw the West, I think President Biden himself, sort of commending President Tinubu for how he addressed the Niger issue, which is, making sure that ECOWAS was involved and so on, which I don't think we've seen a lot of in the past. So, that being said, what do you think is happening, and what do you think it means for us as a country?
It's a reflection of the pains of the people. That's just what it is. However, I want to put it out there that one illegitimacy cannot legitimize another illegitimacy. It doesn't work that way. And good governance, yes, and actually, whether it's a civilian coup or a military coup, an illegitimacy is an illegitimacy. Whether it's here with us, call it a civilian coup or whatever, because the subversion of the will of the people is a coup on its own. That illegitimacy cannot legitimize another illegitimacy, okay? Now, I am not in any way a proponent of military intervention, or that is not in any way in the mix of my thought processes as far as the way that we can get these things done. Because actually what happens is that over time, after the clamoring, after the euphoria of welcoming change, in quotes, okay, over time you begin to see that the military or whoever takes power begin to degenerate. So it's a fundamental thing, it's a question of good governance. Okay. And for us, I think that also we need to tread carefully. Yeah. So that we don't, get into trying to hype one illegitimacy, trying to hype it over another illegitimacy. So that's out of it. However, the people who are trying to be comfortable with whatever form of illegitimacy that they have, you understand, can only be assured that there's an expiration date for everything. The longer or the farther the stretch of the boomerang, the more disastrous the effect. Now, the worst that it's going to happen would be the upturn, the resultant effect that comes from the people directly. And that's going to be a very dangerous thing to allow happen. And if the elite, the political class, know what is about to be unleashed in the context of the discontent of the people are suffering. I am speaking of Nigeria. The pains, people are at their edge. Every little thing they're like, so if the elite know what's best, They should try as much as possible to give a semblance of good governance, at least 30, 40, 50%, because to the best of my knowledge, I don't expect much from them, but to save the day. Because if this explodes and implodes, it's going to be horrible.
Indeed. We have to be careful that the people's discontent doesn't, overcome other things. But that being said, there are also schools of thought that believe that you being unhappy with the system, there are ways to go about it. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you think the lessons learned here from those who feel betrayed or who feel let down. You've already made the point of the issue of IREV and transmitting of results. Truthfully, the law, so to speak, Electoral Act, does say that it's up to INEC. But INEC did say that they would do it repeatedly, again and again. And even though they can now stay behind the law and say, well, we didn't have to, Nigerians can say, you told us you would, and you didn't. So there's a level of betrayal, so to speak, that people feel. So I'll give some examples now, even on a personal level. People have called in here to studio to say, I'm never voting again. I put my energy here. We saw a lot of young people excited.
Yes.
Some were planning what they would wear, what they would take to the polling units and so on.
Exactly.
So now, do you think perhaps the wrong lesson has been learned here when we look at the bigger picture, that the winner of the election, the person who was declared winner, only won with 38%, which means that about 62 or so percent of Nigerians voted another way? Don't you think there's some level of silver lining there, assuming that people are unhappy with the current state of things, that there's a lesson to learn there rather than, just giving up and saying, I'm no longer participating?
Well, all I can say is this place belongs to you, the people. This place belongs to you, the people, and there's no way that any person can, actually, if you abdicate, is your loss. Yeah, abdication. If any person who abdicates or runs away, it's not going to wish away the reality that you will face either now or in the future, right? However, I want to address certain things, which first is, you mentioned there are stipulated ways to go about when you are aggrieved, when citizens are aggrieved. But I want to ask you, what has been the responses of those? We have also seen the subversion of those same processes, and that is a further decline. It just shows you that things are going further down in the system. I'll give you a practical example. It is legitimate for citizens to protest. It is legitimate. I mean, as long as you are not causing harm or disrupting things, but it is legitimate to make your voices heard. When the people who ought to be upholding those processes, those kind of things, clamp down on them, then there's a problem. And there is a danger that themselves are deliberately walking into, because they are setting up the whole system for anarchy. When the judiciary, for example, can no longer be trusted or cannot be trusted, and the people who choose to resort to it, even if it is out of their reach, but they have hope that it is possible for some measure of sanity, for some measure of hope to come from there, and that also is subverted, then that is another further decline and another further setting up of the system for anarchy. And not only that, but a further setting up of themselves for destruction, because it's just very simple. When there is no other avenue for the people to resort to, then it's a problem. Actually, if you ask me, if I was the president, I would encourage people's voices to be heard. That way, you can gain insight into society, understand how to solve the problems from their root, from where they are coming from. The judiciary should be able to have their independence as the system that we operate in, so that there would be no loss of hope in the whole system.
That's fair enough. You raise an interesting point. I think about a week or two ago, you were present at an event where the former Ekiti State Governor had a keynote speech. That is the birthday anniversary of Professor Udenta. I don't know if you caught the speech, but he made a suggestion about how, if possible, when elections are held and results are given, that we should get rid of the winner by slight majority having the complete total of the government. So he used the example of the president having about 38% of the votes and having 100% of the government. You spoke about the president allowing voices to be heard so you can gain from that. I'd like to hear what you think about that idea, that ideology that if you got 20% of the votes, you should get 20% of the government, so that 20% doesn't end up working against the overall good of the nation. And he used his party as an example that they actually did that during in 2012 with Occupy Nigeria and all of that they were aware what removal of fuel subsidy would do at that time, but they played politics. He admitted that on the pulpit or on the stage there. So do you think that idea or that suggestion holds any water?
Yes, I mean, all I have said in terms of going back to the fundamentals, it will only work for the long term, but there's always room for the short term. Okay, such suggestions, but then again, that would only be within it's within the prerogative of the president, whoever that is there at the moment. Any person who can say, oh, it's better for me to glean some of these ideas even though they are in opposition, because in any case, when elections are over and the president is inaugurated, he is no longer a party president, or he was a party candidate, but now a president of the people. Okay, so, and he's not governing for a section or a particular set of people, but for everybody. He's the president, or supposed to be the president of everybody. And it's important for this whoever, because it is that legitimacy of the people, that goodwill of the people, that empowers and gives him the ultimate legitimacy to govern the will of the people. And the suggestion could work for the short term. But like I keep saying, everything that we are doing as far as governance is concerned in Nigeria today, and possibly Africa, but let me just be specific, is only delaying the evil day. If we do not join our minds and thoughts and voices into the rethinking of our governance systems and structures, it's going to collapse somehow, someday. It's only going to be that way. And take it from me, may not be even in my lifetime is possible, because in any case, the decline of the Roman Empire, to the best of my knowledge, as history said, took more than 1,000 years, or approximately that. So we are in steady decline. And democracies, in quote, all over the world is in a steady decline. People don't understand it. So the earlier we start rethinking our governance systems and structures and processes, the better for us.
All right, that's fair enough. That's just about sums up our review and recommendations. We've spoken a lot, and a lot of your recommendations are very stellar. Hopefully, we see them take root someday. But just to round up, final thoughts on our process, the electoral process, and where we are going. We have some off-season elections coming, Bayelsa, Imo, Kogi. From what we've seen so far, and we have such huge numbers of litigations when it comes to elections, hundreds of them. They're all rounding up on Saturday. That is about a day after today. That's when we'll know finally, before people start going to Supreme Court and so on. So that being said, with all we've seen, we're almost at the end of an election cycle. These days, election cycle includes the judiciary, which ideally shouldn't. But that being said, that's how it is now. So these off-season elections, what do you see coming for them at this stage of our electoral process?
Well, you did mention that a whole lot of people are very discontented with the whole process. And this election should have been the best, yeah, because of the level of interest generated among first-time voters, non-voters, and people who had non-interest voters, and all of that. Should have been the best, yeah. But you see that it has further removed the interest of the people, from the whole system. And as far as, if you ask me, this is my own personal opinion, it has nothing to do with any other person, but I would think that if I place a lot of confidence on an umpire who turned out not to be the best in their game, right? I would very much doubt that I would have so much confidence in such umpire going forward. It would only, and it doesn't matter what the outcomes of the elections, that you mentioned would be. I would think that there is less confidence. There would be less confidence. That's what I think. If it would have been better if the outcome rather of this heighten the confidence of the people, and then in these other ones, well, is neither here nor there, but the confidence would have been maintained until afterwards. But that's thereabout. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Rex. It's been a pleasure having you and getting to delve into your thoughts on the matter. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
All right, that's all we'll take on this segment of the program. We'll go on a short break and bring to you some reports to get you up to speed on the things happening around the nation. When we return, the Polity continues. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly.